The forest stretched like a living shadow under the silver light of the full moon. Every leaf, every branch seemed to hum with secrets. Mist curled between the trees, and the air was thick with magic that had existed long before humans could name it. In this ancient forest, nothing moved without purpose, and nothing was as it seemed. Alara moved carefully along the winding path, her bare feet silent on the damp earth. She was a healer, known in her village for her rare skill with herbs and her uncanny knowledge of magic that could mend both body and spirit. Yet tonight she felt the weight of the world pressing on her chest. The villagers had spoken of a wounded stranger somewhere deep in the forest. No one dared approach him. Most feared he was cursed, but Alara had never been afraid of shadows. Fear, she had learned long ago, was a luxury that could kill you faster than any blade. She reached a small clearing, where the moonlight fell in a perfect circle on the forest floor. There, lying among the ferns, was a man. His hair was as black as midnight, his body marked with cuts and bruises, and yet there was a presence about him that made Alara stop in her tracks. He radiated power, danger, and something else she could not name. The stranger stirred and opened one silver-gray eye. It was like looking into a storm. "Please, help me," he whispered, his voice low, rough yet commanding in a way that made her heart catch. Alara did not hesitate. Kneeling beside him, she brushed dirt from his wound, whispering spells that made the cuts close like they had never existed. The air around her shimmered faintly as her magic mingled with the stranger's own aura. As she worked, he watched her. There was curiosity, wariness, and something darker, a recognition, as though he had been waiting for her all his life. "Who are you?" she asked gently, not looking up. "I am Kale," he said, his voice catching slightly. "And you are foolish to touch me." She glanced at him, startled by the sharpness in his tone. "I heal those in need," she said simply. "You were hurt. I couldn't leave you like that." Kale's silver-gray eyes narrowed. "I am not ordinary," he said, each word heavy with warning. "Touch me again, and it may cost you more than you can bear." Alara felt a chill run down her spine, but she did not step back. There was something in him, something wounded but proud, that drew her closer rather than pushed her away. "You need rest," she said. "Then I will leave you." Kale's gaze lingered on her hands, now glowing faintly with residual magic. For a moment, the feral intensity in his eyes softened, replaced by something almost human. Yet it was only a flicker, gone before she could acknowledge it. "Rest?" he repeated, a bitter laugh escaping him. "Do you not understand? No one rests when cursed by the blood of the moon. No one survives the chains of this throne without losing themselves." Alara frowned. "The throne?" Kale's hand, rough and calloused, twitched involuntarily, almost as if resisting his own movement. "I am the Lycan king. I rule this cursed land, and my fate is bound to the forest, to the creatures within it, and to the curse that follows my bloodline. Anyone who touches me, anyone who becomes close to me, suffers as I suffer." Alara's heart skipped. A king? A cursed king? And still he looked at her as though she were nothing, yet everything. "I do not fear curses," she said, her voice steady. "I only fear cruelty." Kale's gaze hardened. He rose slowly, the moonlight glinting off his tall, muscular frame. Even in pain, he moved with predatory grace. He took a step closer, and Alara could feel the pull of his presence like a storm tugging at her soul. "You are a mistake," he said finally, his words sharp as a blade. "The world is not kind to those who bind themselves to me. You will bring ruin, and I cannot allow it." Alara felt her chest tighten. "Mistake." The word hung between them like a curse. She had expected anger, fear, perhaps even hatred, but this was far worse. It cut into her deeper than any wound she had ever tended to. I cannot leave you," she whispered, "and I will not allow myself to be ruled by your fear." Kale's eyes flashed with something dangerous. "You will leave, or I will cast you out. Your life, your freedom, you have no right to gamble it here." Ilara's hands shook slightly, but she stood her ground. "Then I will leave on my own terms," she said. "But I will not disappear without hope. Not when there is still light in this forest." The Lycan King's eyes darkened with frustration. And for a moment, Alara saw the man beneath the beast, the lonely king, trapped by prophecy, feared by his own people, and chained by his own pride. "You do not understand," he said, voice low and haunted. "Even if you survive, even if you escape, you will carry something that belongs to me. Something that will change everything. You are my mistake, and mistakes have consequences." Ilara looked at him steadily, even as fear curled around her heart like a winter frost. "Perhaps," she said softly, "but mistakes can also bring miracles." For the first time, Cale said nothing. He turned away, pacing the clearing like a predator caught between instinct and restraint. The night stretched heavy, the wind whispering secrets through the trees. Ilara knew then that she could not stay. She gathered her satchel, her herbs, and the small charm she carried, each one a blessing and a protection spell. She would leave before the world claimed her as part of his curse. But as she stepped toward the edge of the clearing, Cale spoke again, voice nearly a growl, filled with a raw mix of anger and something closer to longing. "Disappear if you must. But know this," he said, stepping back into the shadows. "The world is not kind to those who defy the Lycan King, and when the time comes, you will remember my words." Ilara paused, her heart pounding, and looked back at him. The man who had called her a mistake stood tall, unyielding, yet something fragile lingered in his gaze. She felt the pull of fate stronger than any fear, stronger than any warning. "I will remember," she said softly, "but perhaps I will also change it." With that, she slipped silently into the forest, leaving the clearing and the Lycan King behind. The moonlight followed her like a quiet witness, and the mist curled around her like a protective cloak. As she walked deeper into the unknown, Ilara could not shake the feeling that she was carrying more than her own fate. There was a life inside her, a spark of destiny she had not yet understood. And though she did not yet know it, that life was bound to Cale, the cursed king who had called her a mistake. And somewhere, deep in the heart of the forest, Cale sensed the absence of her presence. He sensed the thread that tied their fates together, stretching invisible but unbreakable. His hands clenched, his heart thudded against the chains of his curse, and for the first time in centuries, he felt a question he could not answer. Could a mistake ever become salvation? The night held its breath, the forest whispered, and Ilara disappeared into shadows carrying the spark of life, the weight of destiny, and the beginning of a story that would shake the kingdom to its very roots. The first step had been taken, and the game of fate had begun. Ilara walked deeper into the forest, each step taking her farther from the Lycan King's territory. The moon hung low, casting silver light over moss-covered stones and ancient trees. Mist swirled at her feet like spirits guiding her path. She had no destination in mind, only the need to hide, to protect the secret growing within her. Her body felt heavier than usual, but it was not fear that weighed her down. It was the knowledge that she carried life tied to Cale, the Lycan King. A life that could change everything, for better or for worse. She had seen the storm in his eyes when he called her a mistake, but she had also glimpsed something fragile underneath his darkness. A man chained by his own curse, longing for something he could not name. The forest around her whispered with life. Small animals stirred, and shadows seemed to move with purpose. Ilara stopped to gather herbs for her journey, herbs that could heal and protect. Every leaf, every root felt more alive to her now. It was as if the forest itself had recognized the life she carried. Days passed, though she could not tell how many. She found shelter in a hidden glade where a small stream trickled over smooth stones. The water reflected the moon, broken into pieces by the ripples she caused when she washed her hands. She breathed deeply, tasting the cold clarity of the night air. Here she was alone, yet not lonely. The forest seemed to embrace her, a quiet guardian against the dangers beyond. Even in solitude, Cale lingered in her mind. She tried to banish his image, tried to push away the memory of his eyes, sharp and stormy, yet softened in that fleeting moment of recognition, but it was impossible. He was part of her now, tied to her in ways she could not yet understand. One night, as she rested beside the stream, she felt a stirring within her, a gentle, pulsing warmth that made her pause. The life inside her was not silent. It responded to the magic around her, the energy in the forest, and perhaps even to the presence of Cale. Though he was far away, she placed her hands on her belly, whispering quietly, "Be safe, little ones. I will protect you no matter what." Her whisper was carried by the wind, and for a moment she thought she heard a faint echo in response, a growl or a sigh, too soft to be sure. The forest held its breath. Ilara shivered, a mixture of fear and wonder filling her chest. Meanwhile, Cale stood in the shadowed halls of his fortress, restless. The Lycan King's palace was as dark and imposing as its ruler, filled with stone corridors, flickering torches, and the quiet echoes of power. He paced the floors, every step echoing with authority and unease. His mind kept returning to her, Ilara, the woman he had called a mistake. His advisors whispered behind closed doors, urging him to marry, to secure heirs, to strengthen the kingdom. But Cale could not hear them. He could not focus on politics or strategy. The memory of her hands, her voice, her unwavering courage in the face of his cruelty haunted him. He had called her a mistake, and yet the truth he dared not speak aloud burned inside him. She was the only thing he could not control. She had disappeared, and with her went a part of his own heart. Cale had always believed that love was weakness, but now in the silence of his empty halls he felt a weakness he could not name, a longing that gnawed at him, a fear that he had lost something irreplaceable. Back in the forest, Ilara continued her journey. She discovered a hidden grove filled with strange, luminous flowers. Their petals glowed faintly under the moonlight, and their fragrance was sweet, almost magical. She realized these flowers were not ordinary. They were ancient, rare, and full of power. She carefully collected a few, knowing their magic could help her protect the life growing inside her. Days turned into weeks. Ilara's skills as a healer grew sharper. She learned to listen to the whispers of the forest, to understand its language. She could sense danger approaching before it arrived. She could feel the movement of creatures hidden in the shadows, the rise of winds before storms came. Her connection to the forest deepened, and with it, the power that flowed from within her. Yet despite her growing strength, there was a loneliness that gnawed at her. She missed Cale, though she refused to admit it even to herself. Not his words, not his anger, but the man beneath the Lycan King, the man who had looked at her with recognition, if only for a moment. One night, as the moon rose high and full, Ilara sensed a disturbance in the forest. Shadows shifted unnaturally, and the air grew heavy. Something or someone was approaching. Her heart quickened. She crouched by her small fire, her hands glowing faintly as she prepared to defend herself. From the darkness emerged a figure, silent and graceful. Not Cale, but someone else, a hunter or perhaps a spy sent from the kingdom. Ilara's eyes narrowed. She did not hesitate. She called upon the magic within her, and a protective barrier of light rose around her. The figure paused, sensing the power. Then slowly, it withdrew, bowing slightly in acknowledgement before retreating back into the shadows. Ilara exhaled, relief and pride mingling in her chest. She had survived the encounter unscathed, and the life she carried remained safe. As she settled back beside the fire, she realized something important. She was no longer merely a healer hiding from the world. She was a protector, a guardian. She carried within her the future of the kingdom itself, unborn children whose destiny was tied to the Lycan King. And she would do whatever it took to ensure they survived. Back at the palace, Cale's restlessness had turned into obsession. He walked the halls at night, haunted by dreams of her. In those dreams, she was never afraid. She moved through the forest with a grace and power that mirrored his own. He saw her hands glowing with light, felt the warmth of the life she carried, and understood in a way that terrified him that she was bound to him forever. Cale's advisors noticed the change in him. His rage, once steady and controlled, now flared and twisted unpredictably. His people whispered that even the Lycan King could fall prey to love, a dangerous, impossible thing. But Cale did not care for their warnings. He only cared for the echo of her presence, the memory of her hands, the weight of what she carried. Ilara, meanwhile, discovered more about her connection to the twins. When she sang quietly, her voice soft and low, she could feel them respond. Small movements, pulses of energy, even tiny sparks of magic. She realized that the children were more than ordinary. They carried a spark of their father's power, mingled with her own magic. Together they could be stronger than either parent alone. She smiled softly, placing her hands on her belly. "Grow strong," she whispered. "We will face this world together, and we will be ready for whatever comes." The forest seemed to lean closer, listening as if promising protection. But even in the heart of the wilderness, danger was never far. Shadows moved at the edges of her vision, and distant howls echoed through the trees, reminders that the Lycan King's enemies were always near, and that her own journey would be fraught with trials. Yet she did not waver.
She had made her choice.
She would not return to Kale, not yet, not until she could ensure the safety of the life within her, and perhaps when the time was right, she would face the Lycan King again, not as a mistake, but as a woman who had discovered her own strength. But fate is never patient, and destiny rarely waits. One night, as the moon cast silver beams across her small camp, Alara sensed a presence unlike any she had felt before. The air grew heavy, electric, and the hairs on her arms stood on end. Somewhere in the forest, eyes watched her. Not ordinary eyes, eyes that mirrored the storm and silver light of the moon. Her heart skipped. She knew without doubt who it was. Kale. Though she could not see him clearly, she felt the pull of his power, the echo of his presence. It was not anger this time. It was longing, regret, and something deeper, an unspoken promise. Alara's breath caught. She whispered into the night, "Kale, I am not afraid." The wind carried her words to him, though he was still far, and in that moment both of them understood something neither had spoken aloud. Their destinies were intertwined. No matter the distance, no matter the danger, no matter the curses or the fears, the night held them both in its quiet embrace, one hidden and alone in the forest, nurturing new life, the other bound by throne and curse, haunted by what he had lost. And between them, the thread of fate pulled taut, unbreakable. Tomorrow the forest would test her again. Tomorrow, the kingdom would stir. But tonight, in the silver light of the moon, they existed together, separated yet bound, a promise whispered in shadows and silence. And the story had only just begun. The forest had grown quieter in the days since Kale's presence had brushed against her like a shadow on the wind. Alara moved carefully through the trees, each step measured, each sound analyzed. She had learned to read the whispers of the forest, to know when danger approached, and yet there was a restlessness in her heart she could not ignore. She could sense him, Kale, the Lycan King, near but unseen. Every instinct in her body warned her of his power, yet a part of her wanted him closer, though she would never admit it. She had changed since leaving the kingdom. Her magic had grown stronger. No longer were her spells mere tendrils of light to mend minor wounds. They now pulsed through her like silver rivers, protective and fierce. She could command the shadows to shield her, bend the wind to carry her scent away, and even coax plants to grow where she needed cover. The life growing within her seemed to amplify her strength, reacting to her emotions, growing with her intent. Yet despite the forest's safety, Alara felt the weight of solitude pressing upon her. Nights were the hardest. The moonlight that had once felt comforting now carried memories. Memories of Kale's eyes, stormy and silver, burning into her soul. She remembered the harshness of his words, the sharpness of, "You are a mistake." But she also remembered the flicker of something softer, something vulnerable that he had not intended her to see. She shook her head, trying to banish thoughts that could weaken her resolve. She would not return to him, not yet. She needed time to grow strong enough to protect herself and the life she carried. But fate has its own plans, and the forest was never as empty as it seemed. One evening, as the moon rose high and silver light spilled across the mossy floor, Alara sensed movement. A figure stepped silently through the trees, a shadow among shadows, powerful and precise. Her heart leapt, not with fear but recognition. Kyle. He paused at the edge of the clearing, hidden in darkness, yet every muscle in his body radiated the strength and danger she remembered. For a long moment they simply watched each other, separated by distance but bound by a thread of fate that neither could ignore. "You should not be here," Alara said quietly, her hands glowing faintly as she summoned a protective barrier. "I could say the same," Kale replied, his voice low and rough, carrying the weight of regret. "And yet here I am." Alara's gaze hardened. "Why are you here? To punish me? To claim me?" Kale shook his head, a bitter expression crossing his face. "I do not know. Perhaps both. Perhaps neither. I only know that I cannot stop thinking of you. Since you disappeared, every moment has been empty. Every command, every hunt, every decision. Meaningless without you here." Alara's heart ached. The same man who had called her a mistake now admitted that her absence left him hollow. She wanted to turn away, to flee deeper into the forest where he could not reach her, but her body, her magic, reacted to his presence. The life growing inside her stirred, responding to the connection she could not explain. "You should not feel this," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "You are bound by your curse. Your heart has been hardened for centuries. And yet, Cale said, stepping closer, his voice softening, even a hardened heart can remember what it lost, and perhaps even a king can learn regret. The forest seemed to still around them, the rustle of leaves and distant cries fading into silence. For the first time, Cale allowed himself to step fully into the clearing, revealing the raw strength of his form, and the vulnerability he had tried so hard to hide. Alara felt a rush of emotions, fear, longing, anger, and hope. She had trained herself to be independent, to survive alone, but now, standing before the man who had been both her danger and her fascination, she realized that her resolve was being tested in ways she had not expected. "You think I could forgive you?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "After calling me a mistake? After everything?" Cale's expression softened, though the storm in his eyes remained. "I do not expect forgiveness. Perhaps that is too much to ask. But I can offer this. I regret my words, and I will spend every day making amends if you allow me to." "You're not my mistake, Alara. You are something far more precious." Alara's hands glowed brighter, her protective magic responding not to anger but to the intensity of her emotions. She wanted to believe him, yet caution held her back. "And what of the life inside me?" she asked. "What if it changes everything? What if it destroys you?" Cale's gaze softened further, a rare vulnerability shining through. "Then I will face it as I face everything. I will not abandon what is mine to protect, not now, not ever." A shiver ran through Alara. The words, the sincerity, the raw honesty, they reached her in ways that magic could not. And yet the forest reminded her that danger was never far. Shadows twisted unnaturally among the trees, and the wind carried whispers she could not understand. The Lycan King's enemies were many, and now she was not only protecting herself but the life growing within her. Days passed with tense distance between them. Cale remained nearby, careful not to intrude yet unable to leave her side completely. They communicated in subtle ways, leaving small gifts, observing from the shadows, and sharing quiet moments when the forest permitted it. Every glance, every small act of care built a bridge between them, fragile but undeniable. Alara's magic continued to grow. The life inside her responded not only to her intent but to Cale's presence as well. When he was near, she felt warmth and energy coursing through her. When he was absent, the air seemed colder, emptier. She realized that the twins were not just a connection to him. They were a part of both their destinies, a bond that no distance or fear could sever. One night, as the moon reached its zenith, Alara prepared a small ritual beside a stream to strengthen her magic. She chanted softly, her words blending with the wind and the gentle rustle of the forest. The water shimmered with silver light, responding to the rhythm of her voice. Her hands glowed and the trees seemed to lean closer, absorbing the energy she released. Cale watched from the shadows, his eyes reflecting the silver glow. He was silent, almost reverent, witnessing the strength and determination of the woman he had once rejected. Every word she spoke, every gesture she made, reminded him that she was far more than a mistake. She was powerful, brave, and unyielding, qualities he had long forgotten existed in anyone but himself. Suddenly, the forest shivered. A distant howl echoed through the trees, not the call of an ordinary wolf but something darker, more ancient. Alara froze, her hands still glowing and her senses sharpened. The presence of danger was unmistakable. Cale stepped into the clearing fully, his form radiating power. "You are not alone," he said softly, his voice carrying authority and reassurance. "I am here." Alara nodded, her trust in him growing, though fear still lingered. Together they faced the shadows that moved in the distance, knowing that their bond, fragile, dangerous, and profound, was now stronger than either of them could have anticipated. The night stretched on, heavy with tension and unspoken promises. The twins inside Alara stirred once more, tiny pulses of magic responding to the union of their parents' strength. It was a quiet declaration that they were part of something greater, something that could challenge curses, face enemies, and change the fate of the kingdom itself. Cale and Alara stood side by side, watching the forest, sensing the dangers that waited beyond the silver light, and though neither spoke, both understood a truth that could not be denied. Their destinies were bound together, and the life growing within her would be the key to facing the trials ahead. Yet even as they found a fragile peace in each other's presence, neither could ignore the fact that their enemies were closing in. Whispers of the Lycan King's missing heir, his mistake, had begun to circulate in the kingdom. Shadows moved in the corners of the forest, curious, hostile, and relentless. Alara placed a hand on her belly, feeling the twins stir in response. "We are ready," she whispered. "Whatever comes, we will face it." Kale's gaze softened. "Together," he said. "No matter what." The forest seemed to pulse with anticipation, the wind carrying their words like a promise to the moon itself. The night had not yet ended, and their journey was only beginning. But for the first time, both the Lycan King and the healer felt a flicker of hope, an ember in the darkness that whispered of love, courage, and the power of destiny. And somewhere, in the distance, the howls grew louder. The forest was stirring, the kingdom watching, and the story of the Lycan King and the woman he had once called a mistake was far from over. The night held its breath, and fate waited, ready to test them in ways neither could imagine. The moon was high and full, casting silver light across the forest like a mirror of fate. Alara had grown stronger since leaving the kingdom. Her magic was no longer simply a tool for healing. It was a living force, pulsing with her intent and the life she carried. The twins within her stirred constantly, their presence amplifying her power and instincts. She had learned to sense danger before it arrived, to move silently, and to command the shadows to conceal her. Kyle had remained near, careful to respect her space, yet unable to ignore the pull of destiny that tied them together. He had followed her for weeks, watching from a distance, observing how she had grown into a guardian of herself and the life she carried. Every night he wrestled with the emotions that had long been foreign to him: regret, longing, and a desperate need to make amends. But tonight, the forest felt different. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the trees themselves held their breath. Alara sensed it first, a disturbance in the rhythm of the forest, subtle yet unmistakable. Shadows shifted unnaturally, and the wind carried whispers that were not the forest's own. Kyle stepped closer from the darkness, his presence a solid reassurance against the invisible tension. "You are not alone," he said softly. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Ilara's hands glowed faintly as she prepared herself. "I know," she replied. "But this feels different. Something is coming." They had not long to wait. From the edges of the clearing, figures emerged, dark, fast-moving shapes that moved with unnatural precision. The enemies of the Lycan King, those who had long coveted his throne, had discovered the existence of his mistake. They sought the twins, believing them a threat, a key to ultimate power. Ilara and Kale moved as one, instinct and magic intertwining seamlessly. She directed shadows to shield them, while Kale's form blurred and shifted, his Lycan strength making him a force impossible to match. Together, they were a storm against the approaching danger. The attackers struck with the speed of wolves and the cunning of hunters. Alara's magic surged, forming barriers of silver light that twisted and shimmered as they deflected blows. She could feel the twins reacting, tiny pulses of energy echoing through her, strengthening her spells. She whispered quietly, "Stay with me. We can do this." Kyle moved like a shadow in the moonlight, striking with precision and power, yet holding back just enough to not harm her. His silver-gray eyes glimmered with determination and something deeper, regret and love intertwined, shaping his every action. Every move he made was for her, for the children, for the bond they shared, fragile yet unbreakable. The battle raged through the clearing, and the forest seemed alive, bending to Alara's will. Roots surged from the ground to entangle enemies, and vines twisted to shield her. The twins, reacting to the danger, pulsed with energy that sparked small flashes of light across her skin. Cal felt it too, a current of power he had never seen before. It was as if the unborn children themselves were part of the fight, a living force of magic that neither enemy nor curse could ignore. In a desperate moment, one of the attackers breached the barrier. Ilara's heart raced. She could feel the strain in her magic, but Kale was there instantly, intercepting the threat. Their movements were synchronized, a dance of instinct and trust forged over weeks of careful observation and unspoken understanding. "You are stronger than I imagined," Kale said quietly, his voice a mix of awe and admiration. Ilara's lips curved into a small, determined smile. "So are you," she replied, focusing on the attackers once more. "But we are stronger together." As the last of the enemies fell, either incapacitated or retreating, the forest grew silent again. The moonlight bathed the clearing, casting a serene glow over the exhausted pair. Alara leaned against a tree, breathing heavily, feeling the twins stir within her as if to reassure her. Cale stepped closer, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "You were incredible," he said softly, his silver gray eyes reflecting pride and a deep, unspoken emotion. "The twins, they responded to you. They are strong because of you." Alara's heart swelled with emotion. "I could not have done it without you," she admitted. "And I could not have done it alone. We need each other, Cale. Whether we want to or not, we are tied together by them." Cale nodded, his expression conflicted. "I have made mistakes. Terrible mistakes," he said, his voice low, filled with remorse. "I called you a mistake, and now I see that you were never a mistake. You are everything I never knew I needed." Alara felt a warmth spread through her chest. The man she had once feared, the king who had rejected her, now stood before her, vulnerable yet steadfast. And she realized with quiet certainty that she had begun to forgive him, not just for his words, but for the man he was, and the man he could become. They sat in silence for a moment, letting the weight of the night settle around them. The forest, once threatening, now felt protective, as if acknowledging the bond forming between them. The twins stirred again, tiny pulses of energy echoing in response to the calm and reassurance surrounding them, but peace is often temporary in a world ruled by power and prophecy. The first light of dawn began to filter through the trees. A new presence made itself known. Unlike the attackers from the night before, this presence was ancient and commanding, carrying a weight that pressed on the forest itself. Alara felt it instantly, a magic older than the kingdom, older than the Lycan king. It was a test, a judgment, and it would not be ignored. Cale sensed it too, his instincts screaming of danger unlike any he had faced. "This is no ordinary threat," he said quietly. "We must be prepared." The twins, they may be the key, but they are also the target. Alara nodded, placing a hand on her belly. "I am ready. Whatever comes, we face it together." The air grew heavier, and the shadows deepened as if the forest itself waited for the coming confrontation. The twins reacted, pulses of energy spreading through Alara, through Cale, and into the trees around them. It was a silent declaration that they were not powerless, that they were part of a destiny that could change the course of kingdoms. Suddenly, the forest trembled. A figure emerged from the mist, tall and imposing, shrouded in darkness that seemed to devour the moonlight. Its eyes glowed faintly, and the energy it carried was so strong that even Cale took a step back, instinctively preparing for battle. Alara's heart raced, but she did not falter. Her magic flared, protective and radiant, surrounding her and Cale in a shimmering barrier. The twins stirred once more, tiny sparks of energy echoing through her, enhancing her spells. "You dare approach the child of the Lycan king?" Cale's voice was low, dangerous, and full of authority. His body shifted slightly, the transformation of his curse humming beneath his skin. "Leave now or face the consequences." The figure laughed, a sound that carried centuries of knowledge and malice. "The prophecy speaks of them," it said. "The children of the king and the healer. They will either save the world or destroy it, and I will determine which." Alara tightened her grip on the magic within her. "You will not touch them," she said firmly. "They are mine, and we will protect them." Kyle stepped closer, placing his hand over hers, reinforcing the barrier with his own power. Together, they radiated a force that made even the ancient figure hesitate. The forest itself seemed to respond, branches twisting, roots rising, and the moonlight sharpening into beams of protective energy. The figure paused, studying them, before slowly retreating into the mist. But the warning was clear, their trial was far from over. This was only the beginning. Alara exhaled slowly, her body trembling with exhaustion and relief. Cale kept his hand on hers, a steady presence, a promise unspoken yet understood. The twins stirred once more, their tiny pulses of energy calming as the immediate threat receded. "You see now," Kyle said quietly, his silver-gray eyes softening, "that you are more than anyone could imagine. Even I underestimated you." Alara smiled faintly, exhaustion and pride mingling in her expression. "And now we know," she said softly, "that together we are stronger than any threat." But even as they shared this fragile moment, both knew that the trials ahead would test them in ways neither could yet foresee. Enemies lurked in the shadows. The prophecy of the twins loomed over their heads, and the bond between them, though stronger, would be challenged again. The moon cast silver light over the forest, illuminating two figures bound by destiny, standing together as the night slowly gave way to dawn. Their journey was far from over. The judgment of the moon, the prophecy of the twins, and the power of love and magic would soon collide in ways that could reshape their world forever. And the forest, ancient and wise, whispered its approval. The forest was quiet, but it felt charged, as though every tree, every stone, every breath of wind was holding its own anticipation. Ilara stood in the heart of the hidden glade, her hands resting lightly on her belly. The twins inside her stirred with an energy that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. She could feel them, tiny pulses of magic that connected her to Kale, to the forest, and to something far larger than herself. Kyle stood beside her, his form solid and imposing, yet his eyes softened as they fell on her. The Lycan king had never felt so human, so vulnerable, yet so powerful. For weeks he had watched her grow, admired her courage, and learned the depth of his own mistakes. Tonight he would stand not just as a king, but as a protector, as a man seeking redemption. The moon was full and brilliant overhead, but a shadow began to creep across its silver face. An eclipse was approaching, rare and powerful, a moment when magic in the world surged to its fullest. The forest seemed to respond, the mist curling higher, shadows twisting into shapes that moved with intent. "You feel it too, don't you?" Kyle asked quietly, placing a hand on her shoulder. Ilara nodded, her heart pounding. "Yes, something is coming, stronger than anything before." From the edge of the glade, a figure emerged. It was tall, cloaked in darkness, its presence radiating power older than the kingdom itself. The air around them shimmered with energy that was almost unbearable, pressing on both Kale and Ilara like a tangible force. "You have grown strong," the figure said, its voice echoing like a chorus of whispers. "But strength alone will not decide the fate of the twins. Only unity, only love and courage can prevail." Ilara exchanged a glance with Kale. His hand tightened over hers, and together they stepped forward, drawing their strength from each other. "We are ready," Kyle said. "Whatever comes, we face it together." The figure lifted a hand and the air shivered. Shadows twisted violently, leaves and mist swirling in a cyclone of magic. The forest itself seemed to roar, acknowledging the trial that had come to test them. Ilara felt the twins' energy surge, tiny sparks of magic echoing her own, weaving through her body, through Kale, and into the very air around them. The attack came suddenly. Shadowy tendrils shot through the glade, moving with speed and intelligence. Ilara raised her hands, summoning a barrier of shimmering silver light. Kale's form blurred as he moved with the swiftness of the wolf within him, intercepting the tendrils with powerful strikes. Together, they were unstoppable. Ilara's magic flowed like rivers of light, reinforced by the twins' latent power, while Kale's strength and agility made him an unbreakable shield. Every motion was precise, every action a dance of instinct and trust. They had trained together, not in words, but in presence, in connection, and tonight it made them formidable. The figure in darkness laughed, a sound that carried centuries of knowledge and menace. "You are strong," it said, "but you do not understand the force you face. The prophecy is not a promise. It is a trial." Ilara's hands glowed brighter, the energy of the twins amplifying her magic. "Then we will face the trial," she said firmly. "We are not afraid." Kale's eyes softened as he looked at her. "You have been my strength all along," he said, "and now I am yours. Whatever comes, we do not fight alone." The figure advanced and the shadows intensified, twisting into monstrous shapes that lunged at them. The twins reacted instinctively, sending out pulses of energy that disrupted the attackers, making them falter. Ilara and Kale's magic intertwined, creating a force field that pushed the shadows back, forcing the figure to pause. The battle was fierce but silent in its intensity. Neither Kale nor Ilara spoke much, for words were unnecessary. Every glance, every touch, every movement conveyed understanding, trust, and unity. Their bond, once fractured by pride, fear, and misunderstanding, now radiated a strength that even the figure could not ignore. "You have learned well," the figure said finally, its voice tinged with approval. But the final choice rests with the hearts of the parents. Only their courage and love can shape the future of the twins. Alara closed her eyes, placing both hands on her belly. She whispered softly, "We are ready, little ones. We are ready to protect you, to fight for you, to love you with everything we have." Kale knelt beside her, his hand covering hers. "I am with you," he said quietly. "Always." A wave of energy surged from them, the twins' power responding to their united will. The forest around them glowed, leaves shimmering, roots rising to protect them, the very air vibrating with the intensity of their magic. The shadows faltered, twisted, and finally dissolved into nothingness, unable to withstand the force of love, courage, and unity. The figure, no longer threatening, stepped back. "So it is done," it said. "The prophecy will unfold as it must, guided by hearts that are strong and true. The twins will live, and they will carry the power to shape the world." Alara exhaled, tears of relief and exhaustion streaming down her face. The twins stirred, tiny pulses of energy radiating warmth through her body. She looked at Kale, whose expression mirrored her own, pride, relief, and a depth of emotion neither had dared to speak aloud before. Kale lifted her chin gently, his silver-gray eyes locking with hers. "You were never a mistake," he said softly, the words carrying the weight of his entire soul. "You were my dawn, the light I never knew I needed. And now, we begin anew together." Alara smiled, her heart full. "Together," she echoed. The moon, now fully illuminated once more as the eclipse passed, bathed the forest in soft silver light. The shadows receded, leaving a calm that felt almost sacred. The air was still, filled with the quiet rhythm of life and magic. The twins, resting safely within Alara, pulsed faintly, tiny sparks of magic signaling their promise, their potential, and their connection to both parents. Kale gently wrapped his arms around Alara, pulling her close. The warmth of his embrace, the steady rhythm of his heart, was a reassurance that she had never known she needed. The forest around them seemed to bow, acknowledging the union of strength, courage, and love that had prevailed over darkness. "You were brave," Kyle whispered, "stronger than I imagined, and now, we can face whatever comes next together." Alara rested her head against his chest, feeling the steady pulse of his heart, the connection of their shared strength. "We are a family," she said softly, "and we will protect each other always." Kale pressed his forehead against hers, a rare vulnerability in his gaze. "I will never let you go again. Never." They stood together in the glade, the forest around them alive with magic, the silver light of the moon reflecting their unity. The trials had tested them, but love and courage had prevailed. The twins, safe within her, stirred as if to affirm their presence, their energy weaving a bond stronger than any curse, any prophecy, or any shadow. And for the first time in centuries, Kale felt hope, not the kind that comes from power or fear, but from connection, from love, from the knowledge that he had found something worth protecting beyond himself. Alara looked up at him, eyes shining with emotion. "Our journey is just beginning," she said. "The world may still test us, but we will face it as one." Kyle nodded, his expression a mixture of pride, love, and determination. "One," he echoed. "Always." The forest, the moon, and the stars seemed to witness their promise. Shadows no longer held sway, for light and love had proven stronger. The prophecy of the twins was no longer a threat, but a beacon of hope. A future built on courage, unity, and the bond of two hearts who had faced darkness and emerged stronger. Alara smiled, placing her hands once more on her belly. "We will grow together," she whispered, "and we will show the world that even the darkest curses can be overcome with love." Kyle kissed her forehead gently, a silent promise. "And we will stand together always," he said. As dawn began to break, casting golden light over the forest, the Lycan King and the healer stood side by side, stronger, united, and ready to face whatever the future held. Their hearts, once divided by fear and misunderstanding, were now entwined. Their love, tested by darkness, had become their greatest strength. And the twins, safe and pulsing with magic within Alara, were a living testament to the power of hope, courage, and destiny fulfilled. The story had reached its climax, but their journey had only begun. Together they would face the world, not as king and healer, not as mistake and cursed, but as a family bound by love, courage, and magic that could withstand anything. The moon shone down, full and bright, as if blessing them. The forest whispered its approval, and the Lycan king and his healer, united at last, stepped into the dawn, ready to begin the life they had fought so hard to protect.